And I'm finding in myself when I am the shortest, the snappiest, when I parent in a way that is not aligned with my values, I am reflecting on the fact that I am desperately seeking control. I'm trying to control the situation. I'm overstimulated. I'm trying to reduce the noise. In a desperate attempt, I will say and do things that are not within my values and they don't speak to how I want to parent. And if I think about my kids, when they have their most challenging behaviors, it's like a mirror. It's the same thing for them. They are feeling overwhelmed, overstimulated, out of control. They need a sense of safety, and they will do almost anything to get that. And so that mirror, once you see it, it's hard to unsee it, how our children's behavior can really mirror ours. And so to model how to get through that it's hard. So we're on a learning journey with them.
Hey mama, are you feeling like you're walking on eggshells around your little one? Does every day feel like a battleground from breakfast to bedtime? You're not alone. If meltdowns, sensory sensitivities, and communication challenges are turning your days upside down, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sensory Savvy Mama, the podcast for moms raising neurodivergent little ones. I'm your host, Victoria, and I get it. I've been there. The endless research, the frustrating appointments, the feeling like no one understands what you and your child are going through. Here, we ditch the cookie-cutter advice and embrace the power of understanding your child's unique sensory needs within the context of your family. We'll dive into practical strategies, expert insights, and real-life stories to help you create a calmer, more connected family life. Because you deserve to feel empowered, not exhausted. Let's ditch the overwhelm and discover the joy of raising a sensory kid in a neurodiverse family. You ready? Let's go. Today on the podcast, we have Erin, the mom of 3 amazing littles under 5 years old, neurodiverse family leader, role model, and partner. She runs the amazing account Spins and Stomps. Now, Erin and I have had a couple conversations over the years. We've done a couple Instagram lives, and every time I walk away, just amazed at her capacity to hold space for her children in the ways that they show up and are authentically themselves. She is incredibly neuro-affirming, both for her children and for herself. And I've loved watching her learn how to blend and balance her neurodiverse family's needs. And so I'm so excited to have her on the podcast today. I hope we really enjoy this conversation. Erin, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so happy we got connected through Instagram and are able to continue this conversation and connect with other parents on a similar journey.
So tell us a little bit about you. From what I remember from our last conversation, when you were little, you were diagnosed with ADHD, right?
Yeah.
But that has evolved and changed a little bit, especially on this side of motherhood. So tell us a little bit about what that was like for you.
Yeah, so I got an ADHD diagnosis as a child at 6 years old. I was on medication from 6 to 12 years old, and at that point decided I didn't want to take medication anymore. I also came from a background where my parents were not on the same page about pursuing diagnosis, and we have a split household, so there was that whole dynamic. So I grew up not really having a solid foundation and understanding of my neurodivergence. I just knew it was there and then moved on with my life. And it wasn't until I had my first child and she turned 2 that we found ourselves going through the diagnostic process, and she ended up getting an autism diagnosis. And her support needs, I would say, are in the moderate, like in the middle range, if we had to quantify it, so people can get an understanding. She had more of the stereotypical autistic traits and is unreliably speaking. So there really was no, we can or can't get a diagnosis. We needed to get a diagnosis to access services so she could get into special education. So from her diagnosis began a several year long journey of learning about what autism was, learning more about ADHD, how often those two co-occur. And that's over those couple of years, reading many books and lived experience and the manual itself for the criteria, realized I also am autistic. And at that point, we had our middle child, who is now 4. And it was around same thing, I would say close to 2. We started having some really challenging behaviors, although very different needs. Hyperverbal, this child was hyperverbal, but also found ourselves exploring. It looked very different than our first child, but exploring different traits and what neurotype we might be. The how many diagnoses can fit under the neurodivergent umbrella became apparent to us. It's not just autism. It's not just ADHD. There's a lot out there. as you I'm sure so that was when I started to talk to my parents a little bit more about my diagnosis. Yes, I got the ADHD diagnosis at 6. I started my middle child was showing a lot of asynchronous development, and that's when I learned about twice exceptional children, giftedness, and I was talking to my mom, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, you were actually you were identified for gifted and talented education." So I was like, "Whoa," started reading about that. Opened up a whole new world of understanding for me, and then a couple of years later, we're still on the journey of ch long-winded, but we're still on the journey of we don't know what neurotype he has, basically. We've been put on several wait lists, and we have just been learning basically about we've been in occupational therapy for him, but we've been learning about giftedness, ADHD, autism, all of it to basically try to learn how to support him and ourselves. And then we had our youngest almost 2 years ago. So that's the 3 of them, and that's been our family's journey through understanding or trying to understand each of our neurotypes. And I think it comes together maybe that way for a lot of families where it's this long process of as you get in it, you start learning more.
Yeah, there's such a steep learning curve, and the internet is a wonderful thing, but also a treacherous thing because there is so much information out there. And there's a lot of conflicting information too. So it's really hard. I think one thing that I see moms who are doing so well is there's a level of intuition that you have to apply for your family and your family's needs. One of the things that's coming up for me too, especially given what your childhood was like, was how are you and your spouse doing this together? It sounds like you guys are really on the same page and he's been involved every step of the way. How have you, I know that's a question that comes a lot because a lot of times moms carry the bulk of it and the burden of it. And I don't mean a burden that we don't care for our children or don't love doing this for our children, but it's a lot of extra work people have no idea of when they're looking from the outside in. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit about that, how has that been? And how has, I guess, his involvement in this journey and his learning along with you?
Yeah. So when we first started noticing traits in our oldest, we were not on the same page at all. I really advocated to pursue therapies and diagnosis, and he was more on the let's wait and see. And we did end up pursuing on a time frame we were both comfortable with. We started initiating therapies and then eventually pursued diagnosis. And it was through, I think, watching and learning how I took what I was learning on my own and was applying it to her life and what I was learning on my own self-discovery journey, watching that and watching both of us support ourselves and end up thriving, that he realized this is working. There's a lot here, and there's actually some stuff that I'm learning about myself too. So I think it was through his own self-discovery journey and watching it in action really helped him through that process. And now, yeah, we're completely on the same page. And as we've added more children to our family, and more to our plate, more responsibilities, and more to juggle, basically, we've had to learn how to both not only accommodate ourselves and our kids, but run a household. And so, like you said, there's that whole mental load piece that I do take that on in terms of I'm homeschooling. I have taken on pretty much learning about sensory needs or emotional regulation. He's an entrepreneur. And so he's also very much into the growth mindset and emotional regulation. So I would say from that standpoint, we both take that on. But yeah, we kind of balance everything by I guess splitting a lot of responsibilities where I will take on one set of responsibilities and he'll take on another. And so we've been able to be in a position with his new job or his new company that he started to have me scale back working in the hospital so that I can spend more of my time and energy working on homeschool and that's all of that. And then he's been able to take over more of the finances, which has been incredibly helpful. And I know that is privilege in and of itself to be able to do that. And I'm thankful for that. But that it's just a balancing act. And then there's, of course, stuff that we do together.
Thank you for sharing. It's hard because I think there's so many different relationships and roles that we are all playing out in this, and especially being parents in current society and cultural demands and expectations. It can be a lot. It can be a lot to manage and juggle, especially if you don't feel like you're on the same page as your partner or are having to defend against extended family members who maybe are not in support of your children or supportive of how you want to raise your children. So I love watching your Instagram reels and stories that you post on the things that you guys are doing. I think, again, I just have been amazed at how well you seem to balance and blend it all together while still being very honest and humble about it's a big learning curve.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and setting boundaries and expectation, like, those are joint things, like, I would not be able to do that solo. It takes both of us as a united front on that, and yeah, it's a really big learning curve, and I'm really glad he's as committed to learning about all this as I am.
Sure. Because this is called the sensory savvy mama, one of the things that I think from my background as an occupational therapist and having that sensory integration background, one of the things that I see make the biggest difference is when families get on board and start to understand their kids' sensory needs and even their own, right? In identifying that we are all sensory creatures, and that's a huge part and greatly impacts our quality of life. So tell me a little bit about how you found out about sensory and what kind of helped you figure that out and what's been the most helpful in learning that about your kids.
It was with my first child, and because she had a lot of sensory seeking behaviors, like climbing all the furniture, like to the level of unsafe, and so I didn't really conversations with our pediatrician, waiting to get an occupational therapy, I think evaluation. I think somewhere on the social media platform, I was just searching around, and I ended up coming across autism and occupational therapy and sensory seeking behaviors. And so the first book I read was The Out of Sync Child, and that really helped gave me a good foundation to try to understand why I was seeing these behaviors and what to do about it or how to help my child. So from a sensory standpoint, that's where we just took off was with that book.
Yeah, that's a great book. And I was really glad I had a good clinical instructor who gave me a couple of not textbooks, but books like that. And thankfully now there's also more that are written by autistic individuals who give their own lived experience versus an external outside perspective. It's been cool to see too, as more lived experience accounts come out and different things, how that shift to be more neuroaffirming. Because I think some of those early texts can be more diagnostic based of this is what you're seeing, so this is what needs to be adjusted or fixed. And I felt that a lot in school. It's been a while since I was in school, but what I learned was autism to what I know now as autism is very different. And so it's cool to see how that is shifting and learning when families and parents start to understand that sensory system and how that impacts their kids and how their kids are processing things differently. It opens up so much more to see, oh, this is why they're responding this way. And these are the connections that they're making. And this is why it's not that they're trying to be manipulative or have these behavioral outbursts. Like their system is really processing this differently. And looking through that sensory lens can be really helpful. If you're listening to this and you are wondering how to find out more about the sensory system, I created a really short workshop that you can do, whether it's all in one afternoon or spread out over a couple days. It's called the Clarity Lab, and it gives you a really good foundation of the sensory nervous system and how it is impacting your neurodivergent child. It also has a book list, including the Out of Sync Child that we talked about in this episode, but a whole bunch of other ones that I found really, really helpful and recommend to parents all the time. The Clarity Lab gives you that sensory lens to look through. So if you're struggling to figure out how do I support my child, or why are they stemming, or why do they spin, or why are they climbing up and jumping off the couches, or why do they freak out whenever we have to go do anything and I feel like we can never leave the house. Whatever your child's neurosignature is, this gives you that foundation for understanding their unique neurosignature. And it also helps you know why they're doing these things. So now how do I move forward with that? The Clarity Lab has been really helpful for parents who are struggling to figure out and are coming from more of a behavioral perspective of they're manipulating me or something is wrong here. I don't understand why they're doing this, to seeing their child through that neuroaffirming sensory lens, and can start then creating that environment that's supportive of them and requires less need for co-regulation and behavioral management on your part. So If you are interested in that, the Clarity Lab is $9 right now, and this is the summer of 2025. The link will be in the show notes below. Now let's get back to our episode and continue the conversation with Erin and just make it more fun in a way. Oh, this is what's going on. And I think we talked about before we started this, how much our kids mirror back to us what we're learning and experiencing. And I think a lot of what I hear in my own experience growing up was, I'm the parent. I know it's right. You need to do what I say, as a way to be protective. And they were doing it from a place of love and caringness. But now being on this side of things, how I'm raising my daughter, it's not a total 180 difference, but there are some significant differences. And like, actually, this is how I want to approach her. And this is how I want to give her a sense of agency and autonomy. And maybe she's processing this differently. And when you react this way, she reacts to that reaction. So what if we learned how to respond to what she's actually asking for? And what if we saw behavior as bids for connection and help for co-regulation more than a behavior that needed to be managed?
Yeah, absolutely. Two thoughts on what you just said. So first, I think part of how I parent, like the lens that I look through comes from my own lived experience. And just at the time, I only knew ADHD kid. I wasn't doing things to be mean. I wasn't doing things to be annoying. I struggled with impulse control, or I was needing some dopamine, but didn't understand why I was doing it. Just got the negative personality labels attached to it without understanding why. So that lived experience really helps me when I see my children behaving in a certain way, whether it's really challenging or whatnot, whatever it is, automatically see it through the lens of curiosity, like what is behind this? What might they be needing? Or what can this tell me about what they might be needing? And it's about helping them connect those dots. Okay. When we're exhibiting these behaviors or when we're feeling this, I want you to notice. And so we're talking out loud a lot about all of that. I want you to notice. I want you to notice to try to connect those dots for them so they can help self-advocate as they get older. And then the second thought that I had on the mirroring is it's so true. I find this in myself, especially as I'm teaching the kids about emotional regulation. And a lot of the foundation of emotional regulation really is about our nervous system and how safe we're feeling and connected and to our caregivers or whoever's with us. And I'm finding in myself when I am the shortest, the snappiest, when I parent in a way that is not aligned with my values, I am reflecting on the fact that I am desperately seeking control. I'm trying to control the situation. I'm overstimulated. I'm trying to reduce the noise. In a desperate attempt, I will say and do things that are not within my values and they don't speak to how I want to parent. And if I think about my kids, when they have their most challenging behaviors, it's like a mirror. It's the same thing for them. They are feeling overwhelmed, overstimulated, out of control. They need a sense of safety and they will do almost anything to get that. And so that mirror, once you see it, it's hard to unsee it, how our children's behavior can really mirror ours. And so to model how to get through that it's hard. So we're on a learning journey with them.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest thing about parenting is so much learning and learning about yourself too. Like my parenting journey turned out a little bit differently. I solo parent completely. And my daughter's first 2 years were very tumultuous and led to the separation and subsequent divorce. And I was so dysregulated during those years. There was a lot going on. And now where I'm at, though, even though people sometimes look at me and go, "Oh, poor you," I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you have no idea." Like, I'm so much calmer and more present and more connected because my nervous system is regulated, and feeling free to model that for my daughter has been absolutely incredible, of just being honest. Hey, I'm really dysregulated. I'm just going to go in my room for 5 minutes, or I need you to go in your room for 5 minutes so I don't yell at you. I'm really trying to hold it together right now and I'm not doing a very good job at that. And then seeing her when she's dysregulated do that same thing back is so cool. And just being, like you said, curiosity is so important, because I think that flip side of that is when we aren't curious, then we shift to that other extreme of control. I'm so dysregulated. How do I control this situation so that I'm not more dysregulated and more overwhelmed and totally lose it? And when I'm not consciously, intentionally working on that, I divert to those patterns that I saw as a child, right? Those are those natural, automatic, reflexive patterns that we saw. And it takes a lot of energy sometimes and thoughtfulness to pause and have that space to change those narratives. And I think that's something really powerful. And I see a lot more parents being aware of that and wanting to change that moving forward. And I think it's really helpful because I think instead of depending, yes, occupational therapy and speech therapy, and those things are really good. I'm not saying that those are not helpful modalities, but when you as the parent can start to be that agent of change within your own family, it's really cool. And it makes that transition and it just improves that quality of life overall for everyone because you know what you're doing and you're consciously creating that environment where those diverse sensory profiles can thrive together. And you can have that connected family life while still honoring each of your children's sensory needs and your spouse's needs and your own needs. And I think too many times we approach that, and this is a cultural undercurrent of that zero-sum game. If I get my needs met, then that means I can't meet my kids' needs. Or if I need a break, then my partner can't have a break. Kind of thing. Like it's a I win or you win, but we can't both win. And I think when we can reframe that and look at, hey, when both of our sensory needs are met, they don't have to be in competition, but they can be in collaboration or working to complementing each other, then life gets so much easier on the day to day. It's still hard and challenging, but so much easier and so much more fun.
Yeah, no, I so many thoughts like while you were speaking because it's so true. And I see it in my mind, a Venn diagram, right? So about meeting everyone's needs. Our household has 5 people. So if you think about a traditional Venn diagram has 2, right? And there's, let's say, my daughter's side and my side, and then there's the part in the middle, right? And then you could just add more bubbles on with the bigger part in the middle for the 5 of us. And this is how I see everything on the outside is things that drain or take away or dysregulate. For me, that would be things like clutter, visual clutter, lots of noises, overcommitting myself, putting too many things on my plate, that kind of stuff. And to the same token, a lot of that could be shared with my kids, right? And then I would think about all the things that they don't like or that dysregulate them, too high of demands or not getting their sensory needs met. And then I think about their bubbles and each of our own bubbles and all this in there is specific to me, my weighted blanket, being outdoors for my child, free time to stim and play, whatever all of their like glimmers are on the inside. And then the middle is like our big family bucket where there's like something in there that everybody likes to do, whether that's family dance party or whether that's go for a car ride and get a treat or something like that. So in the middle, and that's like visualizing it and being able to answer those questions for myself about what dysregulates me, what's a trigger to me, what dysregulates each of my children, their own specific things. And then also on the flip side, being able to identify what helps regulate them, or whether it be sensory or anything that helps regulate them or put them in a better mental and physical space, then I know that now. And then we can find stuff in the middle. So there are times when we just do something for one person or that person needs to do something just for them. And then there are times that we do things together. And so when I don't have my spouse or my mother-in-law to help me split up the kids, that's how I try to meet everyone's needs at the same time.
Thank you. I've never heard anyone explain it that way, but I really like that analogy. It's a great one. So before we wrap up here, one of the things that I ask everyone is if you could go back to your younger self, or you could speak to another mom who is just starting out and figuring out how to put all of these pieces and sensory needs together and contain them within the unit that we call family so that she can have some of those. When we're moms, we have ideas of what we want to do with our kids and what that looks like to be a mom. And sometimes there can be a lot of grief around, oh, this is going to look a lot differently. But I think we can still have some of those dreams and desires. Yes, it looks a little bit differently, but that's okay too, and opening that up. But that, again, like you said, it's a journey and a process, and there's a lot of learning. So what would you say to a mom who is just starting out and maybe a little bit overwhelmed right now and trying to figure out all the things and feeling like kind of the weight of it is resting all on her shoulders to get it right. What would you say?
Okay, yes. If I was just starting out on this journey again, knowing what I know now, I wish a couple things that people I wish someone would have said to me is the first one. I know it feels like you need to do everything all at once. But for me, what was really helpful was just to pick my top three. If that was feeding, if that was sleeping, whatever age your child is, you can let go of whatever milestones are out there. Whatever the most three critical things to you and your family are, you can just pick a handful or a couple of those things and focus your time and energy on those. So not having to do everything at once. That would be the first thing. The second thing is as long as it's meeting you and your family's needs and it's safe, like it the parenting or your household rules don't need to look like the rules of whatever society has deemed acceptable. Find other neurodivergent families and community, and you can just make it your own and follow your intuition. And just to me, that was the biggest thing was like letting go of traditional societal norms, learning from people with lived experience, following my intuition as a mother and watching my child and just going from there. Those were the biggest things that I would say to someone if they were new on this journey.
Those are great. It was making me chuckle because when we moved into this apartment, we had a couch and then I got rid of it and I got crash pads and big fluffy pillows. And it's funny because my family always teases me when they come over and looks at me weird. I just don't understand why you live this way, but it works so well for us and it provides so much regulation, especially at the end of the day after being at work to come home and build a fort together or crash together or just like curl up across the floor reading books. And that has been so helpful. And that end of the day is one of our times where we have the most dysregulation. So creating a home that fits that time and makes it easy for us to regulate together has been really helpful. And I loved your point too about not doing it all, because there is so much that you can continue to research and do. And what about this? And what about that? And I think that's so helpful and something else that you mentioned earlier in the conversation is what are your values too? What matters most to you? Focus on those things and live from those places instead of what other people are telling you or you feel like you are expected to do. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. And it was so lovely to talk with you again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it as always.
That's it for this week's episode of The Sensory Savvy Mama. I hope you're walking away with some actionable tips and a renewed sense of hope for your journey. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Your child is amazing, and you are the perfect mom for them. If you loved this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other moms like you find our community and lets us know what you want to hear. If you want to connect further, you can find us on Instagram or subscribe to our newsletter for inspiration, exclusive sensory tips, behind-the-scenes glimpses, and so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We are all in this together, Mama. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. One last thing before we go. While I am an occupational therapist, I am not your child's occupational therapist. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. As the parent, you know your child best. So please use your best judgment and consult with your child's healthcare providers before exploring any of the strategies or ideas shared here. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out.